Today we are diving into a topic that sounds intense but affects us all when it is invoked, a state of emergency. So what is it all about? Let's say something big happens, maybe a war, a massive flood, or widespread unrest. The government steps in and says, we need extra powers to keep everyone safe. So that's a state of emergency in a nutshell. It lets the government do things that it normally can't, like restrict movement, deploy the military, and even limit some rights. But there's a catch. It's not a free-for-all. International rules like the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or the ICCPR, says that any restrictions must be absolutely necessary, proportional, and temporary. Think of it like borrowing emergency tools. You only use them as long as you need to fix the problem and then you put them away. There are different methods in which a state of emergency can be executed. For instance, martial law can come into effect for huge threats like invasions, a state of siege for targeted crackdowns, or civil emergencies for disasters like earthquakes. The idea is to protect people, but as we'll see, things can go off the rails if those powers are misused. Now, let's zoom in on Kenya. Our 2010 constitution is designed to keep emergency powers in check, and it's laid out in Article 58 tied to Article 132. So here's how it works. It's got some serious safeguards in that the president can declare a state of emergency, but only for big deal threats. Think of war, invasion, massive unrest, or a natural disaster. The situation has to demand it. Once declared, it's only good for 14 days unless the National Assembly decides to keep it going. That extension needs a 2/3 vote after a public debate, and any further extensions need a 3/4 vote, which are tough hurdles to clear. Plus, the Supreme Court can step in and decide on whether or not that declaration is legal. Any laws passed during the emergency can limit some rights, but only as much as absolutely needed, and they've got to follow international law. Kenya hasn't used a full-on state of emergency under this constitution yet. Yeah, so guys, if you've made it this far into the video, you can like, share, and subscribe to this channel. You can also support us on the M-Pesa till below. Your donations will enable us to continue bringing this kind of content to your screen. Thank you. Let's take a trip back in time to see what happens when emergency powers go wrong. Back in 1952, Kenya was under British colonial rule, and the Mau Mau uprising, a rebellion by the Kikuyu against land grabs and racial oppression, shook things up. The British declared a state of emergency that lasted until 1960, and it was brutal. They brought in troops, bombed forests, and set up detention camps where over 160,000 people were held. Conditions were awful. Think of disease, starvation, and even torture. At Hola Camp, 11 detainees were killed by guards in 1959. The Kenya Human Rights Commission estimates that up to 90,000 Kenyans were executed, tortured, or maimed. The British used tactics like Operation Anvil, rounding up 16,000 suspects in Nairobi and turning some locals into home guards. By 1956, the rebellion was mostly crushed, but the emergency dragged on for years, hunting down resistors. Around 2,000 civilians and 600 security forces died, mostly Africans, alongside over 10,000 Mau Mau fighters. This wasn't just about stopping a rebellion. It became a way to control and oppress, leaving scars that led to lawsuits against Britain decades later. It's a stark reminder of why Kenya's modern constitution is strict on emergency laws. Now, let's look beyond Kenya to see how emergency powers can be twisted. Across the world, some governments have used these declarations to cling to power, silence critics, or dodge elections. Take Egypt, for instance. Since 2017, they've had near constant emergencies, first for terrorism, which were then extended indefinitely. Security forces got free rein to arrest without warrants, censor media, and break up protests. Special courts with military judges handed out harsh sentences you couldn't appeal. It's kept President Sisi in power while crushing opposition. In Ethiopia, a 2023 emergency in the Amhara region extended into 2024, and it let authorities detain people without charges, shut down the internet, and banned gatherings, all to quash militia unrest, but also hitting journalists and politicians. El Salvador's been a state of exception since 2022, with over 80,000 arrests to fight gangs, but it's also nabbed innocent people and critics, with reports of torture and hundreds dying in custody. And finally, in Myanmar, the military's 2021 coup used an emergency to cancel elections. It has killed over 2,000 protesters and has locked up thousands more. These cases show how emergencies can become tools for control, not safety. Kenya's tight rules, short-term limits, parliamentary votes, and judicial oversight are built to stop this kind of slide. Based on global examples, without those checks, it's like giving a leader a blank check for power, and that is always a dangerous game. So there you have it. A state of emergency can be a lifeline in a crisis, but it's a double-edged sword. Kenya's learned from its past and set up strong guardrails, but other countries remind us how easy things can go wrong. I will urge you to stay informed, because knowing how these powers work is the first step to keeping them in check. Thank you for tuning in.